This episode is brought to you by Mortgage Workflow Partners and the Mastering Encompass series, both for users as well as administrators. You can find out all the information about it over at masterengencompass.com. Also, if you'd like to check out what we're doing on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel using the @MasteringEncompass handle. And make sure you stay up to date on all the information, not just with podcasts, but also video content that we bring to you as often as possible. Now let's get on to the episode. Hi, everyone. Larry Bailey here, Mortgage Workflow Partners. It's 1 o'clock on Thursday. That means we're getting together as a community. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Today's conversation is all about operations management best practices, whatever that might mean to you. For me, it's always about figuring out how to leverage Encompass and all the data inside of Encompass to run the company, to basically make sure your customers are happy, your teams are doing what they need to do, and that you're actually making the money that you think you're making. So today is December 7th. We've got a great list of folks that are already here. Thank you very, very much for coming. Please use the chat. This is all this in only 30 minutes. Angie, we deliver as fast as possible. And again, this is always meant to be just a conversation starter in some cases. So as you have questions, as you're listening to this, if you're listening on podcasts, thank you. Get over to mortgage.community and interact with the conversation. But yeah, why do you want to talk about it more, Angie? I mean, we could go on and on. Some of the things that really jump out at me when I talk about operations best practice management is really focusing in on how you're using Encompass over your pay grade. I don't know. It's one of those things where I've never really, I know you're kind of being just silly about it, but the reality is how you use your Encompass in your company is not just about you, right? It's about everybody else. And so earlier today on a project call, we were talking about an underwriter who was having some problems communicating the actual money being used for verified assets for closing, and it was creating some complications with the closers because they couldn't figure out, like, if the borrower showed $10,000 in the bank statement, right, verified assets 10 grand, but it wasn't really all 10 grand because some of it was maybe large deposit, or maybe, I don't know, some of it couldn't be used. Or maybe the appraisal was paid on a credit card. So of course you can't use you have to put that 1,000 back into verified assets to close, right? Because you can't use borrowed funds in a transaction. So, from an operations perspective, the underwriter's like, well, what would you like to do, underwriters? And of course the underwriters were like, well, I don't know. What would you want to do? So it ends up in this circle conversation that I'm sure nobody's ever had, right? And it's like, well, what do we do? And how do we get through it? That's part of the conversation. Another part of the conversation is being able to see what's happening at your company through Encompass. And so I want to talk more about pipeline views. I want to talk more about dashboards. And then I also want to talk about visualizers. And so we're going to get into that. And then last but not least, I want to talk about money in terms of operations. None of us keeps a job if our company's losing money. And in Encompass, money can just be poofed. It can just be vaporized. And if you don't believe me, go talk to your CFO and ask them if they can give you a report to document that you actually got paid everything you were supposed to get paid. Again, earlier today, somebody reached out. We're in that project helping them implement some disclosures on the web and do some workflow reviews. And coincidentally, they got a case in sent to their Encompass admin asking about how to track waived fees. Now, if you're hearing that, you're like, well, how do you track a waived fee? First of all, there is no such thing, right? You can track what fees you were supposed to collect against what fees you actually collected, against what lender credits you gave. But there's no such thing as tracking waived, because if you waive something to the borrower, it doesn't exist. So we're going to talk about money vaporizing in there, and that's part of the operations best practice as well. So if you are watching this replay and you're kind of getting cut off here, get over to Mortgage Community and watch the whole thing. for those that are on here, again, thanks for coming. Does anybody have any particular questions about operations management best practice? If you want to talk about it or come up on stage, we can. And if you want to just chat, that's totally cool too. And if you just want to listen, that's fine too. We always talk about these things. So first thing I want to get into again is pipeline views, dashboards. And I intentionally left off reports because so many people rely upon reports, and it's not like reports are bad, but they're basically stale the moment that they're generated. So I'm not quite sure what value they have except for trying to reconcile the past, which is fine, but that's not really a good on-the-spot plan to manage operations. So part of the thing with Encompass, of course, is that to get a value on your pipeline view or your dashboard, it's got to be in the reporting database. And so show of hands here, some interactive conversations, pop quiz. How many fields are in your reporting database? And what have you been told that your reporting database shouldn't go over? Otherwise, you're going to break Encompass, right? And so, so Angie's got over 3,500. That's good. That's okay. That's a good number. If you've been Encompass certified by ICE Mortgage Technology or Ellie Mae before, you might have been taught 1,500 because that's what pops up in your face every time you open up reporting database. Mike's funny. Mike says it's a mystery. It's not a mystery. It's a fact. You can find out. You might have also been told 2,500 in terms of the, I'm going to exit out of Teams because that thing is popping. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but 2,500. The reality is I've seen Encompass reporting databases well over 7,000. Yeah, a little bit 2,500 is the latest urban legend. The reality is first of all, there is no limit as far as what the reporting database can support. It's a database. Now, there's performance degradation issues, degradation, yeah, to degrade the performance of Encompass in terms of how it performs can be a result of one very important feature of your reporting database, which is the audit trail. So when we talk about reporting, pipeline views and dashboards in terms of operations management, Lib was at 5640. Two databases I updated this morning were at 47 and 4,800 respectively. Though on this side note, as a side note, Lib, especially for you and for anybody else listening to this, if your reporting database update is taking longer than 8 or 10 hours, certainly longer than 24, open up a case with ICE and request multi-thread. I've got the environment I updated this morning with 4,800 fields in the reporting database with several in Audit Trail, which I'll speak to in a moment. They have about 70,000 fields. It takes about 2 hours. Katie, what about you? What's your, I only know what I know. So if you're using multi-thread, how many files, how many fields, and how long does it take to complete it? I'm curious, if you don't mind sharing that with the community. Any event, my point is that, you went from 8 hours to 2. Rock on. That's great. The point is that if you have a lot of fields, it's not the fields that the problem really resides in, it's the audit trail. And when it comes to operations management, a lot of companies, again, had this happen this morning. They're like, I need an audit trail because I need to know who updated these 3 fields on the LE page 1. And I'm like, okay. So I updated the reporting database, which is what I just told you, and added 3 more fields to the audit trail. I've given them all the warnings I can. The question I have is from an operations best practice. I'm like, A, why does that matter to you? B, because only certain people should be able to update that. But B, why not do the closing disclosure too? And this is kind of where I get into these pipeline views and these dashboards from an operations perspective. You can do your SLA measurements. You can do your data analysis to make sure that you've got proper load balancing from your pipeline views and certainly from your dashboards. And you can make sure that you've got the time and using custom fields, the time it takes to go from point A to point B. These are all really good metrics. Another one that I've used I used back in 2014. I use Lender Toolkit, still gives this away for free as far as I know. It's in the free tool shed tier thing. And it's basically user touches. So it's a plugin that you put in and you create some custom fields, and it counts how many times that persona or even that user goes into a file, and then it counts the seconds, how long they're in the file, whether they save information or not. And from an operations perspective, it's a beautiful plugin. Awesome Technologies has one that's, I think, a little bit more robust that I would use moving forward. And Katie says she has over 5,000 fields. Awesome. 2 hours, 5,000 fields. How many loans, Katie? Just curious. So going back on the time thing, these are the pieces that you really want to focus in on operationally. Is how is everybody using Encompass? Is there a difference between the user time in file, or the time it takes to go from disclosures to clear to close? Because that's the stuff you can typically control. How long is it taking for particular states or particular loan programs or even loan types or even branches? Like operationally, these are the kinds of things that administratively you probably don't think about, but you want to make sure you're making these suggestions, my opinion, to your company to say, hey, gang, 58,000 fields. Thanks, Katie. You want to make sure you're giving these suggestions to your ops team, because they might not realize they can have this information. A lot of folks look at Encompass and they look at it like an LOS. I look at Encompass and I say, that's our business. And that's what the whole point of today's conversation is. I want you to, if you're listening to this and you're buying into what I'm selling you, I want you to look at your Encompass as your business, because that's where everybody does everything. And part of the problem with pipeline views and dashboards is they're linear, meaning they're 2D. They don't give you any interpretive results like pull through or true load balance compared to performance of that loan. And that's where you might do something like a visualizer. Now, Jody, I don't know if Jody is on here or not. So if you're a Power BI shop, yeah, Jody's here, cool. So, Jody's an absolute, I always call out Jody, absolute wizard on Power BI. Awesome Technologies has a thing called Bullseye that comes in an easy version as well, which is basically predefined dashboards, but allows you to give all this interpretation. And so from an operations best practice, you can leverage the 2D version, right, for like as you go, but then also make sure that you're leveraging some type of visualizer outside of Encompass to understand what's happening with your business all throughout. Angela adds, to help alleviate the degradation due to audit fields, there is a product out there that saves all fields to audit without turning on. Yeah, so you can do a nightly sweep. So again, ATI has a nightly sweep product that will actually save all the changes as they happen to a custom data object in the file, and then also do a nightly sweep out for audit. I don't, it's good for if you're in the mood for this kind of audit stuff. And I think, there's certainly enough companies that want it. Is it worth the squeeze? Is it worth the cost? And then you also have to make sure it's maintained properly. So somebody recently had a question in the community about the size of the backup. And I can tell you, I looked at that problem, and, ATI's product, out of, it only takes up about 100 KB per file. It's a really small load, and that's really where, if you're using any of these third-party tools, like Angela's pointing out, for these audit, make sure it's working effectively, because size is money. And I think on the post, it was like 200 gigs or something. It really should only be about 7 gigs. So huge difference in cost and support. So make sure you definitely, if you're using third-party tech, make sure it's working properly. In any event, on operations management, has anybody ever had a situation where businesses come to you and ask you for performance measurements, or, how can we get a better workflow through Encompass? And so Luba, in your case, did you leverage, I don't know if it's enough to type or if you want to talk through it or not, but, part of the process here from an operations management is Sometimes you'll also create custom input forms that help illustrate what's happening in that file if the business wants it. But more so, it really comes from, again, these pipeline views, dashboards, and then these third-party visualizers to run that. Some other parts that I find that are really important in running operations is making sure that your teams are actually using Encompass the way that you think. So I don't know, again, in this current stage of being decentralized, it gets kind of tough to walk around and watch people. But has anybody ever actually taken or given you the time? Giving you the time is important to go around and make sure people are using Encompass properly. It is one of the things that that we do as a service, and I hear it constantly, like, "Oh, I wish we had time to do that." And I would thoroughly encourage making sure that you're leveraging out your time, whether it's you or somebody who understands how Encompass is supposed to be used in your company. Match that against your actual documented workflow if you have it, and then make sure people are actually doing that work. There's one of my cats. So Libby says we're going through through recording how to do a job for each department, and it opened up a lot of eyes. Right. Katie adds, we just built some custom forms to help them when they process. We sat with all of them as a group and discussed. And this is great. Lube and Katie, I'm glad you guys are doing this. I cannot advocate enough that workflow comes before technology. It's how I built Workflow Partners was with that concept, because that's all I've ever seen people do is constantly throw technology at the issue. And it's not the issue. Technology is not the problem. The problem is people don't know how to do workflow. So when it comes to, again, running the organization, thanks, Reed. When it comes to running the organization, as far as operationally, quick question, quick poll for those that are following me on this topic. When you go and annually, maybe it's more often than annually, but are you sitting down? Are you getting feedback from your management team as far as what else do they need Encompass to give them in order to make better decisions? Because a lot of times it has nothing to do with anything that you're working on. So again, I'll give you a good use case here. So when we're talking about, usually it'll happen between underwriting managers and closing managers and post-closing, right? This is all part of operations. And I'll constantly hear post-closing says that they continue to have issues that are somehow sourced in the processing or the production of the loan, which is somewhere between processing and underwriting and the borrower. And so that ends up in this kind of circle of conversation between the underwriting team and the closing team and the post-closing team to come up with an overall opinion about how the workflow should look, where the defects are, and where the gaps are. So again, it's where I see a lot of opportunity for companies is to sit down as a group and really discuss what are we expecting to have happen. You're going to see a lot of changes come out into native Encompass over the next 4 quarters. All those major changes are, the major ones are going to be on the web, right? So operationally, how many folks, again, there's about 22 folks on here besides me. How many folks are using Investor Connect? Quick show of hands, type it in there if you are. And the reason why I ask you about Investor Connect is because that's all about EPC. Danielle says, I wish we were. Luba says that they are using Investor Connect. And Katie says it's on the list. You got to start now, like literally now. So, you've heard me talk about all year, if you've been listening to me, talking about task-based workflows and talk about enhanced conditions. And the reason why I was talking about that is because I'm trying to get you prepped for your journey to the web. Sean says they are using Investor Connect. Reed says we were using Investor Connect until we started using AIQ, working to get back into it. Brian says we have 2 EPCs. Is that Investor Connect? Great question, Brian. So Investor Connect uses the Connect platform, but Investor Connect and an investor might be also have a company that's part of a partner, but typically not. So no, EPC, Encompass Partner Connect, is all about vendors. All right, it's all about services. So your flood, your credit, your VOE, VOI, your AUS, appraisal. Those are all partners of Encompass, and so the EPC is converting that partner's SDK integration into using the V3 APIs, so that not only can the data get to them, but they can get you data back into your loan file. So for those that said you're using Investor Connect, Luba, Sean, anybody else, what's your percentage of your investors that are actually on Investor Connect? Again, this is a workflow opportunity. And you'll want to make sure that you plan appropriately, so that your teams understand how long is it taking to deliver, about 80%, which is huge, Sean. Sean, quick question. Do you have any idea how long it's taking you to deliver a loan and get it sold when using Investor Connect versus not using Investor Connect? Wondering if you have that detail. It's about the same. So quick follow-up question, is that because your investors that are using Investor Connect versus not using Investor Connect, are they integrated into the e-folder, or are they still kind of broken where they let you upload, but you still have to manage the conditions off their website? And this is a big deal, and this is part of that whole conversation, because you have to see the value, right? To do the work, there's got to be value. And in Sean's point, if 80% of the files are going through Investor Connect, but it's literally the same as if you're not using Investor Connect, why are we doing this? The goal here is, with everything that we're talking about today, is to ask these questions, is to figure out, why are we choosing this path? A lot of times I'll hear about like POSs. So, you've got the big POS, which is a new kid on the block with Joe Rodriguez, phenomenal product. You got the old dogs out there like Simple Nexus and Blend, and then you've got the option to not use any of those. And I'll speak to that in 1 second. Luba asks, what did you say to measure the time from ship to? Yeah, you want to measure the time from when the file has received the package, right? So back from closing, which I'll get to another detail on that, received the package to purchased. So it's not shipped. The reason why I say that, Luba, is because if you're electronically uploading, the shipped is upload. So what I go from is, when did we receive it and when did it get bought? That's the operation. Now, how long did it take us to receive it is a different problem, but that's, in this particular part, that's what I talk about. So when we go back through, Lucas, you distracted me, sorry. When we go back through and we're filling in the parts I was talking about, EPC and delivery, and yeah, totally lost track of that one. So to kind of get back on track, when we go into leveraging other parts for delivery, if the investor is not pushing back the conditions into the e-folder, which is really where this whole thing is headed, that's the value. So right now, again, if we're talking about third parties, there's third-party tech out there that can literally go out to the investor's website, scrape the conditions, and then push them back into the e-folder. To a lot of folks, that sounds super sexy. To me, yeah, but how much is that going to cost, and how long is that going to stay relative? Because if I can get my investor into Investor Connect, and they're actually using the newest integration for Investor Connect, they should be synchronizing the condition backload and the document upload. That's the whole point of Investor Connect. So operationally speaking, I really want you to, like, for 2024, and I'd love for you to come back to this at the end of 2024, to see how much has changed in your operations relevant to specific topics, whether it's SLAs or turn times, whether it's actual usage of technology that you're paying for, and then all I'll get to one second, Beth. And then also, how much of the native functionality are you using from either desktop or web this time next year? And so to take Beth's question, which is if we use enhanced conditions, but the investor does not, would that be an issue? And the answer is it has nothing to do with them, right? Enhanced conditions is all about Encompass. The Investor Connect, the magic behind that is a standardization of the connection between the Encompass object, which is a document or a data point, and the investor's system to map the document and to map the data point. And then, of course, as those conditions updated, push that back into a unified place. So Beth, not an issue. Doesn't matter. What matters is the investors mapping to the Encompass object so that they can ingest and then push back updates. Are any investors doing that yet? Earlier this year, I don't know who, but I do know that there were at least 2 that were pushing conditions back into the E folder, and then I think it broke. I don't know. I could be totally lying right now. I could be totally wrong, but no. So Angela adds, Beth, enhanced conditions for the underwriter in Encompass. Investor Connect is pushing back STIPs. Sometimes investors will call it conditions, but it thinks it's STIPs. Yeah, they're all stipulations is an old phrase. They're all conditions for purchase, prior to purchase conditions. And I would just go further, Angela. Enhanced conditions are for everybody. It's not just for the underwriter. Enhanced conditions could be for your QC team. Enhanced conditions could be for your fulfillment team or your post-closing team or your shippers. There's all kinds of ways and creative ways to use enhanced conditions. I wouldn't limit them to underwriters. Don't limit yourself. Don't limit yourself with that. As I kind of round out this topic for operations management, I do want to, two things I want to add on again to you. Please work to document your workflow. There are lots of, if you're an Office 360 shop, you can get Visio online, and it doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to be something. And document what's happening from department to department. And as we talked about earlier in the group, there are some that started to do that and to develop resources for those teams. I use Loom. I think I've recorded like 800 videos this year on Loom, and some of it are actually up on some TPO sites. Some are in here in the community. Other stuff is like internal. And what's nice about Loom in particular is it's extraordinarily cheap, sometimes even free. But those are embeddable links that you can put into Encompass. You can do these things, and so I do want to encourage you to leverage documenting your workflow and then using easy technology to explain people how to use it. Office 365 has Stream, Sean. I just get concerned about Stream because they self-delete unless your Office admin knows what the heck they're doing. Also, you can't, again, if it's sensitive, maybe Stream's the right choice. But for me, as we move towards the web, I don't know if it's going to authenticate properly. So everybody make their own choice on what is being recorded and shared. And then the second part really for 2024 is making sure you have a strategy of getting to the web. Doesn't mean you have to move your whole company. It's not that dramatic. It's not that deep. But you do have to start opening your eyes and getting caught up. I created a space in the Mortgage Doc community for Journey to the Web. We're going to be doing, when we come back in January, I'm going to explain this in more detail, but we're going to have these topics and these conversations about what you're doing to move to the web and what you need to start taking advantage of, because that's where all of ICE's R&D is headed. It's where it's been headed for the last 6 months. It's where it's going to continue. I think we're going to get an update maybe by the end of the year for that ICE will push out. Don't know for certain. If so, I'll go through and do the read-throughs like I usually do. But you got to start devoting time to getting to leveraging what you're already paying for. So that's what's rolling out today or this weekend. Angela asked, does Encompass on the web support initial disclosures at this time? It is in limited release. I'm getting my hands on it in the next couple of days. And I will give you the feedback on that, like I did with TPO limited availability. If it's anything like TPO, guys, it's phenomenal. It's Encompass, right? So I try not to be too geeky about it, but it's really, really good. I have brokers who don't know anything about Encompass using disclosures on the web through TPOC, and it's smooth. It's really, really good. We're learning from the experiences, but it's really good. And that means that if I can teach a broker to do it, I can teach a loan officer to do it, right? That's my 30 minutes. And hopefully I've given you some ideas about how to really manage operations better as you round out 23 and working into 24. Keep talking about it in the community. And let me know, other topics that come up. You're going to hear me talking incessantly about Encompass on the web all of 2024. I'm going to be at the ICE conference, booth 520, and hopefully you can stay for the wrap-up show if you're interested in that. Let me know if you need a discount code. It's in the community. If you don't have any of that stuff, just send me a message. Make sure you do. You guys are always awesome. I always appreciate having an audience to talk to. But you know me, I would just talk to myself all day anyway. So having you guys on makes it way more interesting. Keep the chats coming. Keep the community growing. Again, refer 2 people. Get a coffee on me. You guys have a great rest of your day. Take it easy. Thank you. Bye-bye.